Hello and welcome to another episode of the VCDX Podcast, a podcast focused on the VCDX certification with news, updates, advice, and special guests. My name is Simon Long, VCDX number 105, and in this episode, we have an extra long common mistakes section where my special guest will share some of the common mistakes that they see regularly as a VCDX panelist, in the hope that future candidates don't make the same mistakes as those who went before them. Here's a taste of what's coming up.
You're going to show that you're a holistic architect. You know a little bit of MVC&S, so Management Virtual Machine Compute Networking Stories. You know enough to hold a conversation with an SME to get the design impacts and design to the end results.
So it's almost better to remove that constraint even if it did exist and put the networking in your design where you have time to think it through and plan it and design it.
And then when I was successful, I was filling the whiteboard continuously, just continuously going through. And it allows everyone else in the room to go along the journey with you.
Welcome to the news and updates section. I'd like to kick off by congratulating some of the newly minted VCDXs that we've had since our last episode. VCDX number 286, Igor Zekovic from France for passing his DCV. We've got VCDX number 287, Katsuhiko Niino from Japan passing NV. And VCDX number 288, Phoebe Kim from the US passing her NV as well. So congratulations guys, very well done. One other bit of news we have in this episode is there's going to be an online VCDX workshop on February the 28th, which is a Friday. So for those of you who have been unable to attend some of our in-person VCDX workshops, this one is for you. It's online, so it's available anywhere in the world. So to get yourself registered, I'll make sure I'll put the link in the show notes. So that's all we have today for the news and the updates section. You're listening to the VCDX Podcast. Moving on to our guest interview. Who is this episode's special guest? Give me your name and your number.
I'm Paul McSherry, and my VCDX number is 234.
Well, welcome, Paul. Thanks very much for joining me. So can you let us know which VCDX certification tracks do you have and when did you pass your VCDX?
I did the VCDX DCV, so data center virtualization, and I passed it probably 2016.
2016. Really? Has it been that long? I think I remember when you passed. I know time flies, doesn't it? So,
yes.
So, all right, cool. So, and just let our listeners know what's your current role? Who do you work for, and what do you do?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So my current role, I work for VMware, and I'm a staff architect in the advanced customer engagement team.
What does someone in the advanced customer engagement team do?
Yes. So it seems to be it does seem to be a bit of a mouthful at the moment, but it's a role which works in between. It's part of the customer experience org, which works between PSO and escalation. So we look to try and help customers consume technology and make the most out of what they've already bought.
Okay, so it's mostly like post-sales focused then. So the customer's already bought the products, they're maybe not entirely sure what to do next, and then you might go in and kind of point them in the right directions and help them out. Exactly,
yeah. So my focus is mainly vSAN and HCI, and it's a lot of the work I've been doing is looking at the day two operations of VCF and vSAN specifically.
Cool, very cool. That sounds quite a good role. Do you get to travel a lot for that?
I travel around about 30%. I've been really lucky. I've got a really nice team that we go across. So I'm global focused. So I go all over the place. So it's been a pretty, a pretty good ride over the last 18 months. So it's been cool. Very cool.
Well, Paul, I've invited you on this episode of the podcast to share some of the common mistakes that you've seen as a VCDX panelist, in the hope that future candidates don't make the same mistakes as those who went before them. I know we've discussed this a lot in the past, so let's try and cover some of those kind of common mistakes that you've seen. Here we've got number one, risk management and mitigation. So can you talk to us a bit about that?
Of course, yeah. I think so. I've been a panelist for about 18 months now, and I think the whole thought process around the panel is to show your ability to design and show how you can actually design in any way possible. And I think a lot of the mistakes I've seen particularly around risk management, is they'll say they've got a risk, they'll identify risk, which is good. The first piece is a candidate would say the business has accepted the risk with very little mitigation. So at this point, although the business is, yes, they are aware of it, if it all goes wrong, as technologists or as architects, we want to try and at least have some mitigation. So even if it's as simple as someone logs on every day and checks it on day one, and then you look at automating that process with the standard operating procedure later, it shows that we're identifying the risk, and we're also showing that we're actually looking to reduce the impact of our design choices.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point. I mean, there's times where you work with the customer, and often maybe the customer is well aware of the risk, and they're fine with that. So they may not even look to find a mitigation option. But I think for your panel, for your defense, you probably need to think about that a little bit more than maybe that your customer did, and think, okay, customer probably doesn't seem to care about it for whatever reason. What I should be caring about it, what should be the mitigations that I would put in place if my customer did actually care and want some advice there. So
I think you're actually showing to the panel that if your customer, because it's this one customer you're actually giving your design on, but when you go out in the field, you're kind of certifying that you'll do this for the types of customers that might care.
Yep, great point. Very common mistake. We see that very, very regularly indeed. So number 2 here, we've got too many constraints that limit the ability to show design expertise.
Yes, I think so. I was guilty of this when I first put my docs in. I thought, well, I'll use the existing network, I'll use the existing storage, I'll show how much I know about vSphere, and then I limited the area because you are going for, in my case, a DCV. You're going to show that you're a holistic architect. You know a little bit of MVCNS, so Management Virtual Machine Compute Networking Storage. You know enough to hold a conversation with an SME to get the design impacts and design to the end result. And I think by limiting the ability to choose storage, by limiting the ability to integrate in the platform, you're just not showing your design expertise. And that's a limit to score. So the more constraints, in my opinion, the more of a rough ride you could get in a panel, because there'll be more questions. But then it could be the opposite side. It could be something that you're really, really good at, and it was a real constraint, and it gives you time to shine, to actually shine. So it's a balancing act for this one. But I think too many is the often thing I've seen.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this a lot in previous episodes, that as a panelist we have areas that we need to score you down as part of the defense. And if your constraint was, for example, that you gave us, Paul, that the networking was already in place, you haven't kind of shown to us that you understand networking to a particular standard. So what we will then do is, as part of the design scenario, we will then start to dig down into the networking side of things. And that's when you have to kind of think on your feet. And for a lot of people, that might be fine. But for some people who maybe not that strong on networking, can be quite daunting. So it's almost better to remove that constraint, even if it did exist, and put the networking in your design where you have time to think it through and plan it and design it. And then you might find that, okay, that covers all of the scoring points that we need for networking, and we don't even necessarily cover that in a kind of larger detail in the design stage. So
exactly,
it's a really good point. Like, constraining them is a nice way of kind of saying, well, I didn't need to do that, I'm not going to do that. But for us to be able to score you, we need to cover those points, so you'll end up having to go through that anyway. So definitely recommend try and remove those constraints, even if you have to make them up, or, because a lot of the time, I mean, I say the majority of customers I used to work with when I was in services, there was so many constraints around everything. People had bought hardware already in advance. They had a network that they wanted to use. So you almost had to just, take a step back for your design, remove those constraints, and design it how you feel would be best to design it, and then go from there.
I think so. Yeah, I think what I've seen, and it was true in my one as well, was that a design is not going to be 100% real life. It'll be based on real life. It'll be based on real life requirements. But I think in the end, you are trying to show that you can do this for multiple customers. So from a certification point of view, you need to hit all the silos.
Yep. Okay. So number 3, not enough logical design.
Yes, I think this is the one that I think this is one of my most important things I gained from going through the process of being a VCDX was being able to take customer requirements and actually looking at a logical design rather than going deep dive to say which product will solve my problem. So I think the way I normally look at it was logical design is how a technology type person or an architect would take the business need and then map it out so we could go to 3 or 4 different vendors. And then the logical design will last a longer period of time, and we could go to different vendors. And the vendor is the what bits they touch, what bits they configure is the physical design. And I see a lot of people, they go straight for this advanced parameter or this specific answer, and they go looking in all the guides. And all I'm asking for is, could you draw on the whiteboard how you communicate from one side of the network to the other side of the network?
Yeah.
Just in a logical path.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, and this is not necessarily just in the defense, it's also in your applications and the documentation you submit as well. They're quite often
exactly
the logical design part is missed in the documentation, and so is the conceptual design to that as well, and it's very much physical focused. So we want to make sure that both in the design documentation and in the design scenario as part of the defense, logical design is always asked for. We want to be able to see that you can draw it. I mean, for me, the logical design is way easier than the physical. So if someone asks me to do a logical design, it's just normally a few boxes on the whiteboard, and you're good. I think some people overthink it at that point when we just ask for a logical diagram. So that's
exactly.
a really good
and
point.
I think this in the real world, I think logical design when you're working as an architect is literally the most important piece, because you're explaining the pathway between the business and the technical solution. So I think this is the bit where you spend a lot of time in the real world as well.
Yeah, and I think that really goes into the next point as well quite well, is the lack of diagrams both in the design documentation and on the whiteboard for the defense as well. Like, we just don't see enough people grabbing a pen and just drawing out a few boxes and connecting them with a few lines just to help illustrate something. If you want to add anything more to that point.
I think for me, when I wasn't successful, I found myself standing in the room. Then I'm like, oh no, I've got to draw a diagram, because I hadn't actually got to that point. And then when I was successful, I was filling the whiteboard continuously, just continuously going through. And it allows everyone else in the room to go along the journey with you, to develop the use case. And also it gives you the ability to pose questions. And from an architect's point of view, what I found was that it allows me to control the room. What I'm drawing, the attention is on the drawing, and I'm taking taking everyone through this journey. And from a presentation point of view, if presenting isn't your thing, and you're gaining that from the VCDX defense, it's something that you can practice, and then you can have designs in your head that you can just continuously walk through from a logical perspective, and you can rehearse that. And I think that's that's a really good thing to aid both the soft skills and the technical skills. Yeah,
and that's interesting, because it goes into the next point of looking for a slide that answers the question that a panelist asks, rather than you could literally just quickly grab a pen and jot it down on the whiteboard. And I think that's something we see a lot of as well.
I think so. I know. So again, going through when I was not successful and when I was successful, I remember the day before my successful defense was that I literally went through on a whiteboard MVCNS, and literally every single logical, I could just memorize the logical side. But it wasn't that I was memorizing for the defense. It gave me such more confidence that they ask anything about networking, I'd immediately just draw out the network, logically, and then I could then work it out. I wouldn't be thinking which parameter is this, because we're not, there's only so much we can go through in the defense. And not only is it quicker, it gains understanding, but you don't have to keep looking looking for specific areas. So it helps you score more points as well.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when people talk about drawing on a whiteboard, they expect them to be like immaculate drawings and things. And I don't necessarily think, if it's a part of a conversational piece, it doesn't have to be an amazing drawing, because you're talking as you're drawing it, and it's just helping for people to visualize what it is you're trying to get over to them. So you don't have to be an amazing whiteboarder to kind of get used to doing this. I'm not very good. I know that for sure.
I know I'm the same. I'm boxes and that's about it. Matchstick men.
My boxes are never square though. That's the problem.
No, that's my problem as well. I think the good thing as well with the lodge, if you start drawing, it gives the panelists more understanding of how you think as an architect.
Definitely.
And I may ask a question about networking, and as you draw it out, you've suddenly scored things in storage, management, security, availability, just by drawing that out and talking while you're drawing. I think that becomes, you suddenly don't realize how many opportunities you're losing by not drawing something out and speaking it as you draw.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're also looking for the person to be an architect as well, to lead the conversations. And if they're not comfortable in going to a whiteboard and discussing and leading discussions, then that's something that can get you marked down on as well. So it's very important to show that you can do that part as well. And if you don't do it, we'll normally ask you to do it at some point as well.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
All right, Paul, last point. I would use this tool, example vROps or vRNI, without the how, why, and impact.
Yes, I think this is very similar to the risk mitigation is, so you've identified a risk, which is really, really good. Mm-hmm. And you've gone through, and then the actual mitigation is I would use vROps to do that. And then I think this happens a lot in the real world where someone would buy vROps or buy a management tool, just not just out of any tool, of any vendor, and they don't really go through how to operationalize that tool.
Yep.
And so to understand is you're relying on this tool for your design. What's the SLA around that tool? Who's going to use it? What's the operational model around that tool? And how can you do that? And I think normally, if I'm given that maybe once, it's fine. Twice or third time, I'd be asking more around how much do you actually know that tool and if it's fit for purpose to meet your design, to customize your solution.
Yeah, and I think if the architects have used their products before, so specifically like vROps, it is a very powerful tool, but you do have to customize a lot. There's some great dashboards out of the box, but I find, when I was using it, it didn't always cover the things that I necessarily needed to cover. So I would try and then create my own custom dashboards to show the metrics that I was trying to measure. So quite often someone would say, I'm going to use vROps for monitoring. And I say, okay, tell me about the dashboards that you configured. And often they haven't necessarily thought that far ahead. They're just going to use this tool, but often out of the box, it doesn't do what they need them to do. So it's just they just almost like buzzword bingo at that point, just to kind of tick a box.
It does feel like that sometimes. Yeah, it's a catch-all answer where it could be as simple as, that design risk, I'd have a Power CLI script running. That could suffice. Mm-hmm. It may not be operational scalable, but it would be showing the logic of the risk, design, impact, mitigation, and then an operating procedure to do it. Where just saying vROps doesn't really show how your design mind is working for the architecture design.
Yeah.
For that piece of the work.
No, Paul, there are some really good points. So thank you for joining on this episode. So before we go, we have some regular closing questions. So first one is, what was the most enjoyable part of your VCDX certification process, and also follow that by the least enjoyable part?
Okay, yeah, I think the most enjoyable part of the whole process to me was getting out of it the conceptual, logical, physical method. So even now today, I use that every day, and understanding to going through from this method that works everywhere. I know now that when I go into a room with any customer, and it can be anywhere in the world, and it's not always about DCV, it could be about NSX, it could be about anything, any new technology. I can literally go through that whole process, and it changed completely how I work. Yep. And I think going through and then spending the time to do it was really worthwhile. And I think the least enjoyable part, I think that would be, yes, it is brutal. Yes, it is failing. Mm-hmm. But I think the least enjoyable part is I think I preferred to fail and then pass rather than pass first time. I know that sounds silly now, but not at the time. But I think I learned a lot more, but I took an honest look of where my gaps were. Mm-hmm. And then I realizing how much I had to fill in. But it was a good process overall. Yeah,
it's a really good point. Okay, last question of the day. Knowing what you know now, if you could go back in time, back to when you're preparing for your VCDX, what piece of advice would you give yourself? Other than knowing the rubric.
Yes, I'd love that. That'd be good. I think the number one piece of advice that I would have is to make sure that the documentation is the absolute best quality you can do and is fully representative of who you are as an architect. I know that when I put mine in, I thought once I get into the room, I've passed that bit.
Yeah.
And I think knowing what I know now, I think it gives you so much more preparation to have, not only to have to study your design, but to have that design the best that you could possibly have.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that takes time, doesn't it? It doesn't happen overnight.
It does, exactly. And that's why I gave myself deadlines and I put it in by that point. And yeah, that you live, you learn.
Yep. Great piece of advice there. So Paul, how can people find you and follow you on the internet if you want them to, that is?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I've got a blog called www.elasticsky.co.uk, and I'm also on Twitter at @pmacshari.
Perfect. Paul, it's been a pleasure having you on. Sorry it's taken us so long to get this scheduled. I know
it's been a while. It's been busy, isn't it?
It's been a busy end to the last year and a busy start to the new year, but I'm glad we managed to find this small amount of time to get you scheduled in. But we'll definitely have you back on in the future.
Thanks
you
very
again.
Much. Appreciate it.
And take it easy.
Cheers. Thanks, Simon.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for in this episode of the VCDX podcast. Again, thanks to my special guest, Paul McSharry. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please be sure to subscribe, follow me on Twitter @SimonLong_, and share this podcast with others who might find it useful. I'll speak to you all again soon.